So I'm going to talk today about the results of a feasibility trial. So it's a cognitive occupation-based program for people with MS that I'm going to call the COB-MS for short. So in this we looked at initial efficacy as well as acceptability and the experiences from the perspectives of people with MS on this intervention. Today I'm going to just look at the qualitative data, so I'm going to look at the acceptability and the experiences both from the perspectives of people with MS who took part in this research and also from the clinicians, occupational therapists in this case, who conducted who ran the intervention, who ran the COB-MS. So the research funded by the Health Research Board, and these are some of my co-authors. So as Fianna mentioned, about 65% of people experience cognitive difficulties. So we know how people experience these cognitive difficulties really varies, and the types of symptoms that people have and how they manage these symptoms really varies as well. It can be very debilitating for people and as mentioned is seen as an invisible symptom but a very distressing symptom for people. We did some research back in 2022 where we looked at kind of what cognitive rehabilitation looks like in Ireland. And this kind of links a bit with the last question as well, where we found that it was about 98 people, I think, that was surveyed in this when we were trying to figure out what do cognitive rehabilitation services look like? Are people in Ireland getting cognitive rehabilitation? If they are, who is getting the services? And of the people the healthcare professionals that we surveyed in this, only 34% of people said that they were assessing for cognition. And there was quite high numbers as well of people who weren't referring onwards for cognitive screening, even if they weren't doing the screening themselves. But also from this we found that it's commonly occupational therapists who seem to be doing a lot of the intervention. Some of it's because other clinicians like neuropsychologists are thin on the ground, so occupational therapists tend to be carrying out assessment and treatment of cognitive difficulties. So although the evidence for cognitive rehab in MS is growing, so there's some promising results out there. There's still a great need for more research, and there's very few occupation-based interventions that focus on cognition in MS. And when I say occupation-based, I mean the things that we do in our everyday lives. So you know, how we manage our day-to-day functioning. So the intervention itself, the COB-MS, it's an individualised cognitive rehabilitation intervention. It's measured by occupational participation, so we're looking at how people are improving or not in terms of how they're functioning in their daily lives. And it's taught through an occupational lens. So how are these cognitive difficulties impacting on the things that people are doing every day, and how can we improve on that? So our focus wasn't on improving people's working memory or improving speed of information process. We wanted to do that, but our focus was on doing that through an occupational lens. So how can people improve on helping their children with their homework in the evenings, those kind of things. So there's 8 sessions. It's run over 9 weeks, and we have a mixture of individual and group sessions within the intervention. 2 individual sessions, one at the start and one at the end with the occupational therapist, and then the other 6 sessions are group sessions with other people with MS. So the focus, as I said, is on managing daily life. So what are the difficulties people are having because of their cognitive difficulties, and how can we try and improve this? We're looking at employment, if people are in employment, community engagement, so if people want to get involved in their community, and then using things like routines, compensatory strategies, and streaming the demands that people have in order to kind of focus on these. So the aim is to help people to participate more effectively in their daily occupations that they find difficult due to their cognition. So that's the intervention in summary. So the study design, so we had about roughly five objectives for this feasibility trial. I'm going to look today at this objective, which is to determine the acceptability and feasibility of the COB-MS and to investigate any barriers or facilitators to using the COB-MS, particularly from the perspective of the people who participated and the occupational therapists who ran the programme. So the design of the trial, it was a single-blind cluster-randomised control trial, and we had 110 people with MS take part. We had 2 arms. We had a COB-MS arm and a waitlist arm. The intervention was run by occupational therapists. These occupational therapists were working in the HSE, so they were clinicians who were active, working in either in community or hospital-based settings, but they were running the intervention in a kind of community-based setting. So they were trained to deliver the COB-MS. It was important to note as well that the intervention was originally planned to be delivered in person, but this all happened in 2020. So we changed, with a lot of input from our public and patient involvement group, to an online delivery of the COB-MS. So everything I'm talking about here was online delivery of the intervention. So we had participant experiences that I'll talk about, and these were collected from about 20-25% of our intervention arm. The data for this was collected by one of our patient researchers that was on the team. So he conducted the interviews with people with MS and was involved as well in the analysis of the data. And then the focus groups with occupational therapists were delivered by a researcher on the team. And we used content analysis. So in terms of the acceptability and feasibility, the programme was seen very positively, both from people with MS and from the OTs. They found the materials good, the resources were appropriate, and the majority of respondents reported applications of learning following the programme. So that's something we were very happy to see, that people were applying what they were learning in the COB-MS to their everyday life, kind of following the intervention. So the main findings were people with MS, and I'll just kind of briefly go through these, was around the group interaction, how that was really important, so that group part of the intervention. The online, the fact that the intervention was online really came across quite strongly. People had both positive and negative kind of impacts of, or effects of on the participation. They found the COB-MS to be a provider of clarity, and then strategies used after the completion of the COB-MS. So I'm just going to show just kind of a few quotes to kind of show what people meant, I suppose, in relation to some of these themes. So I'll just talk about the bit that's kind of in bold. So this is from one of our participants. They said, it was interactive and you got a bit of a boost when somebody else would pop up and be like, oh yeah, that's happened to me as well. Or you hear somebody saying, sometimes that happened to me, and you don't feel so alone about it. So that group interaction was really, really important for people, that they felt that there were people out there that are experiencing symptoms in a similar way to themselves, because a lot of people did feel isolated, and I suppose in particular you need to think about the context of this as well, and that it was happening during COVID when people were isolated, and people with MS were particularly isolated during this time, when some of the restrictions were being removed. People were still, a lot of our participants were still, not leaving the house as well. So that group interaction, I think, was particularly important at that time as well. In terms of the online delivery, we had never planned to deliver this intervention online, but we did, and we managed. So this was again feedback from a participant. I found the programme itself invaluable, and the Zoom format probably suited me at the time, in that I was suffering very badly from chronic fatigue. The Zoom format actually suited me down to the ground. And I'm a chatter, so I miss the interaction. So there's a double-edged sword on that, but the fact that I didn't have to travel with chronic fatigue meant an awful lot to me at the time. So there was we got a lot of similar kind of feedback from people that they really appreciated having the option of doing this online, because it meant that they didn't have to travel, they didn't have to worry about parking, they didn't have to worry about other things that would impact on their participation in the programme. But you do miss some of the physical, in-person kind of interaction that you would have with an in-person delivery of this intervention. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the COB-MS as a provider of clarity. So, people said that they found it difficult to get information about cognitive difficulties, that maybe they weren't provided with that much information from healthcare providers, but that were busy, and there was more of a focus on some of the physical symptoms maybe that people are experiencing. So they said it's nice that you get down to the little details. They explained about myelin and all that, and when you explain it, it wasn't too much. So people often felt that they were quite overwhelmed when they went to look for information themselves. If they Googled something, they didn't. A lot of people reported not knowing where to start when it came to Googling and looking for information themselves, so they really appreciated the kind of information provision in terms of the COB-MS, as well as some of the strategies that were thought. And then in terms of the strategies, we were very happy to hear that people were using the strategies that we went through in the COB-MS after the intervention finished. So these are some quotes here. So the last one in particular: my experience has been life-altering. The training has set me on a path that I cannot thank you enough for. So it's really, we got some very positive feedback from participants on the intervention. In terms of the occupational therapists, then, it's really important that we had buy-in from occupational therapists. The occupational therapists were doing this in their free time, essentially. So some of them had time that their managers allowed them to do this kind of in their clinical role, but others were doing it in the evenings, they were doing it at weekends. So we had really nice, buy-in from the occupational therapists in relation to this. And they were also quite positive, but they have some suggestions in terms of things to think about when we're delivering the next kind of round of this intervention. But they found that the programme was acceptable. They were happy with the content, and they felt that it was appropriate for delivery with the people with MS that they were delivering the intervention to. One of our primary outcome is the goal attainment scaling, so where people have set goals at the beginning and then they rate on kind of a scale whether or not they achieve these goals. So that was our main outcome, and we had people set goals with the research assistant. In kind of real life settings, it would be the occupational therapist who would be setting the goals with people, so there was a bit of a distance in a way from the OT to the goals, which wouldn't be there if they were delivering this not in a research setting. So that's kind of, I suppose, one point. But the occupational therapist said that the big gap for me was that while you're setting goals, you couldn't be assured that anyone was really following their goals. You're getting, oh yeah, I tried that or I tried that, but it's hard to establish if they were really trying their goals. So that's just feedback from the OTs. I think they would have liked to have more kind of ownership of the goal setting process, which would be the case, as I mentioned, if it wasn't for the research. And then some OTs were concerned about the appropriateness of the COB-MS for those who had more moderate cognitive difficulties. So people were assigned to occupational therapists within their geographical area. That's kind of how we did the randomisation. And we screened for cognition, but regardless of the level of cognitive difficulty that people were having, they were in a group together. So for the most part, most people had relatively mild difficulties, but some people had more moderate difficulties with cognition. So this is just what some of the OTs said. So maybe you just have to match participants with other people at a similar level rather than like excluding them. So they still thought the COB-MS was appropriate for people with more moderate levels of cognitive difficulty, but they felt that maybe the material should be adapted to suit people with more moderate difficulties. So you deliver the material to people at the same level versus some people feeling that they're way behind other people. So that's some feedback that we're taking on board for the next round as well. So just kind of to bring it together, the COB-MS was found to be acceptable, feasible to deliver and to participate in online. The participants reported varied impactful experiences and the impact from and good experiences from taking part in the programme. The results highlight not only the importance of the group interaction for the intervention, but it was beneficial for participants in general, and also something that came up as well as the kind of importance of effective group facilitation by the occupational therapist as well, to really allow for that discussion and for the peer learning and peer support to happen. The online administration was generally well received by participants, and they saw that if there was they were saying if there was a possibility of having an in-person intervention as well, that would be nice, as that would make it more acceptable to a wider group of people. So not everybody wanted to participate in an online version of the intervention. So those recommendations have been taken forward to the next round of our research. So we're in the process now of starting to plan and set up a definitive trial of this intervention. So this is a larger scale definitive trial that will be starting from September. We're going to test the clinical and the cost effectiveness of this COB-MS with 365 people with MS. That's our target. And based on the feedback, we're going to have 3 arms for this study. So we're going to have a control group, and then we're going to have an online delivery of the intervention as well as in-person delivery. So we're going to look at that in-person delivery, which will be great. And just watch the space. We'll be recruiting research staff as well in the coming weeks, so part-time and full-time roles. And I just want to point out as well that we'll be recruiting 2 embedded patient researchers who will be employed as part of the research team as well. So anybody with MS who is interested in being part of this research team, we'd love to hear from you, as well as the wider PPI advisory panel. So that's it. Just want to say thanks to our PPI advisory group, to the COB-MS team, to MS Ireland, in particular Aidan Larkin was a really great help for us with this research, and the Health Research Board for funding the research. Thank you.